Hey everyone, welcome back to Dave's Small Engines. I just picked up this Stihl FS55 straight shaft trimmer, and I'm just going to walk you through quickly on my diagnosis of what I think is wrong with it. Again, the information to me was that it wouldn't run, wouldn't start, so I picked it up because I figured it's usually a carburetor issue. As you can see here, the recoil assembly is seen better days. So where is it here? So that's something I'll have to repair as well. I actually have an extra spare one of those, but I think I'll take that apart and try and fix it first. But yeah, buckle up, come along with me for the ride, and I'll try and explain and figure out what's going on with this trimmer. All right, so the first thing I notice here is that this fuel primer bulb is cracked and broken. I actually just undid this because I was prepping to replace this bulb, but I figured I'd make a video. So obviously if I can't press this fuel primer or purge bulb, it's actually technically a purge bulb, down, I'm not going to be able to pull any fuel up from the fuel tank through the carburetor. So this looks terrible. This is gross, disgusting. Normally I spray all this off, but I wanted to show you the condition of most of the trimmers that I get to work on. Again, air filter, totally brutal. So I'm going to clean the air filter, probably put a new air filter element in it, put a new fuel primer bulb in. But the first thing I'm going to do is fill this with fuel, which I've just done, which is Stihl 50-to-1 oil fuel mix. I only use 91 octane fuel without ethanol because the corn or the ethanol in the fuel, that usually up to 10% if you're buying 87 grade or 87 octane fuel, it laminates the diaphragms and causes the carburetor to not function the way it should. So again, I'm assuming that if this machine is in this condition, that it hasn't been cared for very well, and that there's likely a carburetor issue, and that's the reason it won't run. So I'm going to try and rewind this recoil starter and spray fuel into the cylinder so that I can diagnose that it's not a compression or a spark issue, and then I know to move on to the carburetor. All right, so to get the recoil assembly off, it's actually pretty easy. It's just 3 T27 screws. This one actually holds the top part of the fuel tank on, so we have to be careful about that. 1, 2, 3. That should bring the recoil assembly off. It does, excellent. So let's see if it spins over. Oh yeah, it does. It actually feels like it's got pretty good compression, which is exactly what I'm looking for when I buy one of these, because it means the internals of the engine are not ruined. All right, so this recoil assembly, the way it works is when you pull on the starter string, there's a spring on the other side of this coil that's wound up, and it provides counter tension against your pulling. So as you can see, it still works here, but we just don't have a heck of a lot of string to work with. So I'm going to do my best to reassemble this and see what happens. Looks like what I have to do is pop this retention clip off right there, as you can see, and this should come out. Now there's a little washer here to separate the retention clip from the plastic so it doesn't wear down. If you guys are hearing any noise in the background, I'm sorry. It is hot as heck in here and I have a fan going. So let's see what happens when oh yeah, that doesn't look good. So the spring, it's the culprit. Looks like this has been well used, and again, it's not well maintained. Here's some better lighting in there. There's a bunch of crud built up in there. So the way that spring works, as you can see, it's out. It winds up against the back of this and provides counter tension. All right, so all I'm going to try and do here, because it looks like the spring is intact, is coil this the string spool back up and try and reset it. It may have skipped off or some other issue, or they might have too much string on here. But I'll spare you the details. I'm not going to record that because it'll take some time to do, but I will spool this up and try and reset it back in here and then see what happens. All right, so I've got this recoil spring removed from here, and what I'm noticing at this point is that the metal is very brittle. So it's either rusted or just compromised from age or weather. But this piece right here is supposed to have a hook on it, kind of like so. Oh, let's see, it breaks. And it hooks into here, kind of hard to see, this little groove in here. And that allows the spring to be wound inside and then press against that for when it's providing counter tension. The issue that I'm having is that this spring is just spinning inside of the housing and therefore it's not doing its job. So I'm going to, for the purpose of this video, is pull the recoil off the other trimmer that I have that matches, but I will be ordering a new recoil spring. It's about this long, and installing it once it arrives. So here's that other recoil. It's actually in really good shape, doing its job. So I'll get that buttoned up and then we'll get to diagnosing this trimmer. So again, it's just those 3 screws. 1, 2, third on the bottom. Excellent. So now we can pull it over and definitely see that it has compression. All right, so the next test is we're going to take the spark plug boot off, remove the spark plug, so we can squirt some fuel in and see if we have an instrument that runs. Spark plug doesn't look fantastic. Cylinder looks okay. I don't see any holes or anything in there. All right, so let's squirt some fuel in and see what happens. That's enough to see if it will fire. Put the plug back in. Now the reason the impact was having a bit of a struggle there is because it's actually rubbing against the rubber boot. It wasn't like it was cross-threaded or anything like that. So I'll actually put this in by hand. I'm happier with that method. Should never put anything machine threaded in that tightly with an impact. So spark plug boot back on, and then let's see if we can get it to start. All right, so we'll throttle to the on position. Set the choke, not really needed, because we're not choking any air going into the carburetor. See if it starts. Okay, so that is good enough for me. Now I know that just with that little kick over, that little fire, that fire up, that I'm satisfied that it's a carburetor issue. All right, so now really our focus is just on this side. I'm gonna pull this carburetor off and replace it with a new carburetor that I have. A carburetor actually that I've just done a fresh rebuild on, as I have a few spares. And not to say this carburetor won't work in the future. I just ordered a new ultrasonic cleaner, so I'm going to be cleaning up some carburetors. I'll do a video on that when I get it, and then hopefully I can bring some of these old carburetors back to life. Again, it's usually the internals in the carburetors that are affected. And in this case, I'll take it more apart and give you a closer view. Up here is to remove the 8mm nuts holding the air filter housing assembly on. And it actually sits on 2 long studs right here that hold pretty much, actually sandwich everything important on the intake side of the engine. So we'll get those 2 nuts out of there. Air filter will come off, and then we're left with the carburetor. Now again, I had started to take this carburetor apart, at least to replace the fuel bulb, before I started this video. This carburetor, I don't know if you just heard that, but that's crunchy. It's a bad sign. So that to me tells me right off the bat that there's oh yeah, this is actually great. So what I'm saying, oh yeah, about here is this. Here, I'll see if I can tilt this down for you guys. this carburetor diaphragm is cracking. Yeah, so you can see, oh, I've never seen that before. So this carb diaphragm is literally disintegrating. Wow. So I don't know what's how old it is or what the fuel issue was that caused that. Bad fuel or just age, or a poor or bad parts, but I've never seen a metering diaphragm crumble like that before. All right, so let's take this carburetor off. Now that I have those two nuts off that hold it all together, it's really kind of free floating here. I like to be careful with these gaskets because those can be reused in the future. Now this is very dirty, but I'm just going to pull this carburetor out. Actually, first things first, disconnect the throttle linkage. I don't know if we can really see it all that well here. Oh yeah, this is all gummed up. Pretty bad. All right, so there it's free. And now I pull the carb off, and of course, the only two fuel lines hooked up, but as one of them is still hooked to this piece of the carburetor, it'll stay. Actual physical metal parts of this carburetor don't actually seem in that poor condition. I don't see any blocked valves or anything at this point. The metering lever still actuates, but again, I'm trying to rebuild this carburetor. Sorry, I'm trying to fix this trimmer, and I will rebuild this carburetor at a later date. Here's the carburetor I'm going to replace it with. They're both the Zama C1Q carburetors. They're essentially identical. Maybe if I hold this right side up. Oftentimes the peripherals can be different. So in this case, there is a plastic fuel inlet. In this case, it is brass. But the main cube and all of the inner workings are identical. All right, so let's button this back up and see if we can get it to start. So again, slide the carburetor back onto the studs. I like to do the fuel lines first before I tighten anything up. I just feel like I have more room because the air filter box is not in the way. Oftentimes I'll employ some needle nose pliers to assist. So fuel in hooked up, and then of course fuel purge out. All right, so priming this fuel bulb seems to work. I'm hearing fuel go in. I've got pressure on the bulb. Now it's not a clear bulb, which is actually common. And that's okay with me because I know that with that pressure, I can feel the fuel and I can hear the fuel being drawn up through the carburetor. It's kind of tricky to see, but I'm going to hook the throttle cable back up. And that is usually done by holding the throttle open slightly so that I can feed the cable in like so. So now we take the air filter assembly and button it all back up. Now this is again where I said it's important to keep the gaskets, because I will take this gasket off of the outside, or the very most intake side of the carburetor on the outside, and use it for this air filter. Again, clearing out the dirt. Normally, in this situation, I would either power wash or air blow it, but I just wanted to quickly make a video and see if we could get this trimmer running. All right, so I'll use my low torque impact to put these back on. I'm not going to use the air filter because it looks like this. And I'm just going to try and see if I can get this trimmer started. All right, so throttle locked to the start position. I'm going to choke the carburetor and we'll see if it starts. And there we have it. So as you saw, it runs, it idles, and the next thing I will do, without upsetting my neighbors in the daylight, is tune the carburetor, and I think we're good to go. but the fact that it runs and idles, starts easily like that, tells me that the carburetor is fixed and that I should be able to tune any inconsistencies out of the mixture with the idle, low speed and high speed needle. Okay, so if you've enjoyed this video, give me a like and subscribe. Send me a comment. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to go over anything. And I hope you've enjoyed Dave's Small Engines tonight. Take care. Bye-bye.